The Las Vegas Raiders may have a potential steal in Thomas Booker, and today we're going to talk about what this guy flashed on tape. Plus, Chris Sims, who works for Pro Football Talk, said that he thinks Ashton Jeanty lacks explosiveness. He thinks Ashton Jeanty may never be a good running back in the NFL. We're going to talk about that, plus there's a couple of updates that are kind of coming out with the Las Vegas Raiders. Some updated analysis on some of what I saw from the Raiders tape, specifically related to Pass Pro, which we'll get up into a little bit later on. But let's start this video. Let's talk about Thomas Booker a little bit. Let's talk about what this guy flashed. 44 total snaps for this guy, 30 pass rushing, 14 against the run. As a pass rusher, this guy had 5 total pressures, 1 quarterback hit, 4 hurries. But what I saw from this guy was a guy that has major upside if he develops right. And I'm not saying this guy's the perfect prospect today and he's the perfect football player. But for the first time, this guy played a meaningful amount of snaps in an NFL game. 44 snaps that this guy played for the Raiders. And you definitely felt his presence. And I want to just share with you guys a couple of clips of this guy making some plays. One of the traits that Thomas Booker flashed when the Raiders had initially made that trade, and I watched his tape, was like that first step, the quickness, the movement. I talked about this, and if you guys have watched my content, you guys know I've talked about this. The movement this guy has is impressive. And on tape, he's making plays because of that movement. Let's start right away with this defensive line game. Look at how fast this guy is out of his stance on this one. The right tackle doesn't even recognize Booker. Booker's already making contact with this guy, and this guy has no way to be able to make the switch. And with that, Booker ends up getting to the quarterback. Now, the quarterback does get the ball out. It is an incomplete pass. But these little plays that Booker's making, utilizing his quickness, is impressive. When you think about the New England Patriots on the offensive side, Josh McDaniels loves to run what is called quick game. 1-step drop, 3-step drop, get the ball out quickly. That is all of what Josh McDaniels loves to do. So getting sacks against an offense like McDaniels, who loves to run quick game, is going to be hard. It's the same thing as a team like the Chargers and the Ravens. These teams run the football so much, even if they're not having success, they'll just keep running the football, that as a defense, even on passes, you're going to defend the run before you get into that mindset that we need to get after the quarterback. It also makes it easier when you're the Ravens and Chargers and you're using a lot of jump sets. Right? If you're an offensive lineman, you jump out towards the defensive lineman to mimic a run. Those the type of offenses that like the Ravens and Chargers are. The Patriots run a lot of quick games. So even though Thomas Booker did not have actual sacks on the quarterback, he got close a couple times. So when you play a team like the Chiefs, who might say, hey, we're going to take 30, 40, 50-yard shot plays downfield. The Bears with Ben Johnson, right? Let's design these deep concepts. Booker might actually be able to kind of get home on some of these plays. But you see that quickness on tape, right? You see that movement that this guy has. How on that defensive line game, he almost gets to the quarterback. On this other play, they're going to run outside zone, and look at how quickly this guy ends up blowing the play up. He literally jumps the backside gap and still makes the play. Usually when defensive tackles jump the backside gap, obviously it's probably some sort of run stunt that's being called. But when these guys jump that backside gap, you kind of shoot yourself out of that play. Not Booker, right? Booker ends up just kind of jumping right through there, and he ends up blowing the play up. Or at least he's one of the two guys that kind of gets in there. To me, that's an impressive play. But again, it just kind of shows you that quickness, shows you that movement, and just how fast this guy is at getting after it. Now, he is still technically a little raw when it comes to like the pass rush technique. And you're not going to see Booker like swipe and swim over the top. You're not going to see Booker utilize like hezzy moves and those type of things. But he is fast. His first step is super, super, super explosive. There's bull rushes that this guy gets into. Like, he gets into these guards so fast as he jumps out of his actual like pass rush, like that get off. He's so fast. He gets into guys, he gets underneath guys, and he pushes guys back. He had a couple of nice bull rushes against the all-pro right guard of the Patriots. And he got close to the quarterback, right? He generated a little bit of pressure. Even on the Isaiah Paul interception, Maxx Crosby gets credit for actually hitting the quarterback and kind of impacting the pass, but it was Thomas Booker who ran that defensive line game with Crosby, and he was right there as well. Like, he almost got to the quarterback as well. And again, the movement, right, being able to kind of go left and slant left and then come back towards the right and get close to the quarterback. Booker flashes this. And he made a couple other plays as well, right? Like little underrated things that people won't talk about. There was one play where the Patriots tried to run some sort of trap concept. They're trying to block Devin White with the tight end. Our tight end was kind of coming on like a loop block. He was trying to get up to White. And Booker actually does a great job beating the center. And the tight end sees Booker, so the tight end ends up taking Booker instead of getting up to the linebacker. And the linebacker goes free, and he blows the play up. Right, so Booker had a couple of really, really nice plays. And obviously, I want to see Booker take that next step. And I think for him to take that next step, he needs to, one, have those reps. Two, he needs to develop pass rush, right? He needs to develop pass rush technique. We know, like, for example, Tyree Wilson doesn't have great pass rush technique. It's always kind of limited him. Tyree also isn't super quick. At least Booker kind of has that going for him, right? He is super quick and he kind of gets out of his stance. And I think, that trait, along with if he is able to develop some pass rush technique, should allow Booker to be a good football player for the Raiders. Let me just show you guys an example of kind of what I mean, right? So the Patriots are going to run play action. They're going to end up mimicking like they're running, run blocking. Look at how Adam Butler goes over the top of this offensive lineman, right? You see him actually use his hands. He like swims over the top to get past this guy. We've seen the great D tackles in the NFL right now, right? Like the Chris Jones, the Jalen Carters. These guys use pass rush technique, right? They use their hands. They slap guys to kind of get into the backfield. I want to see Thomas Booker develop that part of his game. Just kind of reeling it in, I think the Raiders' defensive line, one of the things we learned from this first game was they're not going to run the same type of defense they ran last year or even the year before that. Last year, we'll go back 2 years, right? So last year, Malcolm Koonce was hurt, but like the year before, the Raiders used a combination of Tyree, Maxx Crosby, Malcolm Koonce, and Charles Snowden. So they used 4 edge players a ton. Last year, they still used 4, right? Malcolm ended up getting hurt, but they replaced him with Claiborne Chason. Maxx Crosby got hurt. They replaced him with Andre Carter. So the last 2 years, the Raiders went to a lot of 4 defensive ends. This year, the Raiders only went to 3 defensive ends. So the scheme is different this year than it was last year. And I kind of expect that to be, as we kind of go forward, I don't expect a 4th defensive end to play a whole lot for the Raiders. I think Maxx, Malcolm, and Tyree are going to get most of the snaps, which I think does also make sense. Now, among the defensive tackles, we kind of saw the 4 guys that are going to be utilized. Now, Lee Kaifodu may end up swapping with Tonka Hemingway. Hemingway took 11 snaps for the Raiders. Lee Kaifodu may take some of those snaps, but for the most part, Adam Butler, Thomas Booker, those are your 2 guys. Those are going to be your 2 main guys. John Olaolu still played, I think, almost 30 snaps, so I think he'll play a lot for the Raiders this season as well. But it's going to be 3 defensive ends, 3 defensive tackles. There's not going to be as much rotation as we've seen in past years. So we'll see how that kind of works out for the Raiders. But I do like what we saw from Thomas Booker so far. Can this guy be a star player, which some people think? Maybe. It's possible. Right? It's possible he can develop into it. But I do like what some of what I kind of seen. I want to switch focus. I want to talk about something that happened that I don't think people are talking enough about it. There are words that Chris Sims had to say about Ashton Jeanty. I'm going to actually just let you guys listen into this, and then we'll just talk about this on the other side.
Ashton Jeanty had 19 carries for 38 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown was great, too. I mean, he was bottled up, and he just shot out of a cannon and landed in the end zone as the Raiders beat the Patriots 20-13.
I mean, yeah, Ashton Jeanty, I know he's the star and everyone wants to know that, but I mean, that was the only thing you could talk about. I will say this right off the I don't like the way Ashton Jeanty looks. I do not. He has not impressed me once yet. There's a lack of explosion that I think is lacking for a guy that was drafted in the top 10 right now.
You said this back around the draft time, and this is something I'm going to be watching for. He was dominant against lesser opponents. When they played Penn State, he wasn't the same guy, and it's going to be Penn State every week now.
Exactly right. I think it's something to look forward to, for sure. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about him. I'm rooting for him, but he's definitely not caught my eye to this point.
So Chris Mims is basically saying he is not impressed with Ashton Jeanty. He's not impressed with some of what he's seen from Jeanty over the first couple of games. He goes through the fact that this guy lacks kind of like that explosive ability, right? He basically isn't like running away from people at this point. It's unfortunate because I think Ashton Jeanty's kind of getting like the shitty end of the stick, where when you look at the Raiders from an offensive production standpoint, Ashton Jeanty is sucking in the defense. Like, teams are worried about this guy. Even though he's a rookie, teams want to make sure Jeanty does not get going. And we're seeing that. Teams are stacking the box. Teams are looking to blitz a lot, especially on early downs. And teams are looking to shut down Ashton Jeanty, but they're also exposing themselves to big plays, which the Raiders had a lot through the passing game. So it sucks because Ashton Jeanty does have an impact out there, right? He is benefiting the Raiders, but at the same time, it's not beneficial for his own stats. So you got guys like Chris Sims who are basically saying, hey, this guy lacks explosiveness or whatever he's kind of saying. I watched some of the tape with Ashton Jeanty. One of the things I will say is the guy did have good runs, right? He had a 9-yard run a couple times. He had a couple of 6-yard runs, a 5-yard run, a 4-yard run. The guy did have success. And the unfortunate thing for Jeanty is, one, the weather was terrible out there. Two, the Patriots have a pretty good front seven. But the third part of it is because the Raiders got up, they got a little predictable with some of the play calls. They started to run the football down the stretch. The last 8 carries Ashton Jeanty had literally probably went for negative 10 yards, right? He literally lost 10 yards on some of those carries. Maybe it wasn't 10 yards on the last 8, but he lost 6-7 yards on those runs. And there were some runs where you watched the blocking by the Raiders on the offensive line and you looked at it and said, what the hell are the Raiders trying to run? On this play, I have no idea what the hell the Raiders are doing. On one end, you have a front side defensive end that goes unblocked. Then on the other side of it, you have guys that are back blocking, or Jackson Powers-Johnson has to get in front of this one technique, and he has to back block him, which means the run is going towards the right of your screen. But also, 51's unblocked, so I almost think that someone was supposed to trap him. Either the center or Dylan Parham, one of those two guys was supposed to get out to number 51. My bet is that this is on Parham that was supposed to get out to number 51, but I'm not really sure exactly what happens, but I do think that's kind of a blown play right there. You lose 5 yards on that run right there, right? So statistically, that's going to kind of ruin things for Ashton Jeanty. And it's unfortunate because a lot of what people like Chris Sims do is they talk about fantasy football and those type of things, right? People don't care about the real aspect of finding success or not. Because if you watch Ashton Jeanty, you can watch a running back and say, hey, show me if this guy has good vision. And with Jeanty, you see it on tape. He has good vision. He hits the holes well. He knows how to read his keys. You look at the play where Ashton Jeanty falls, this play could have been a potential touchdown. Obviously, he falls, so it's a wet field. That makes sense. But just think about where this play was designed to go. This is supposed to hit in the A-gap, but Jeanty has that vision, and he looks to bounce it outside. These are the things that Jeanty kind of flashes out there, right? They're little things, and they may not translate today, but tomorrow they might. Tomorrow, Jeanty might have a 75-yard touchdown run. And again, it does kind of suck because we have another tough game coming up against the Chargers. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a good football team, you have to show that you can run on even the toughest of the defenses. If the Chargers have a top-tier defensive coordinator, which I do think they have, for the Raiders, you got to be able to go out there and just kind of put it out there on tape and actually do it. And talking about the defensive coordinator, let's just go ahead and switch focus. Let's talk a little bit about something that I actually watched on tape, which impressed me. And that was the Raiders' pass protection. I know not everybody's going to agree with this, right? I think a lot of people like to argue just to argue. I don't know why, but people do that. Anyways, the Raiders' pass pro was actually pretty damn good. And it wasn't perfect. The Patriots did have 4 sacks, but the sacks that the Patriots had, they came in moments where it wasn't one offensive lineman lost and then the quarterback got sacked. It's not like Colt Miller was just getting his ass kicked. It's not like DJ Glaze was just getting his ass kicked. It's not like JPJ or Meredith or Parham were just out there getting their asses kicked. And maybe it was the weather. Maybe that's why guys weren't getting as close to Geno Smith as, maybe you might think. But generally speaking, there were a lot of plays where the pass protection was really good. Where Geno Smith had a clean pocket. He went through a bunch of his reads. Goes left to right, right to left, comes back down to his check down, maybe is able to throw it 40 yards downfield. There were multiple plays where Geno Smith had a very clean pocket. And again, maybe it was the fact that the weather wasn't great. It makes it hard as a pass rush to actually get after the quarterback. But from what I saw out there, the Raiders' offensive line looked pretty good when it came to pass pro. Now, they did have 4 sacks. There was only one of those 4 sacks that you can really put on a guy for not making his block, and that was Jackson Powers-Johnson. He obviously missed on one of those plays. Every other play, the Patriots either blitzed, right? 2 of the 4 sacks were a blitz. The 3rd sack was a defensive line game. It wasn't a blitz, but they did bring 5 guys, and they ran a defensive line game. So it's not like a guy was just getting his ass kicked, right? And of course, the only other sack was the JPJ sack, and that was on JPJ. But generally speaking, I actually liked a lot of what I saw from the Raiders' offensive line in pass pro. And again, just kind of talking about the Chargers. The Chargers don't have an elite pass rush unit. They do have Khalil Mack, but what the Chargers are going to want to do is similar to what the Patriots want to do, which is they want to simulate pressure. They want to try baiting your quarterback into bad passes. They're going to try to blitz a lot, right? Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator of the Chargers, a lot of what he does is kind of like scheme, based off a scheme. So the Chargers will not have elite players, right? Like they don't need Jalen Ramsey to carry this defense. But the Chargers will use an elite scheme, which I think Jesse Minter does run over there with the Chargers. But again, I think for the Raiders, it just comes down to this. If you're an elite offense, if you want to be an elite offensive line, when they simulate pressure, you have to be able to swap. If DJ Glaze's guy falls off, Glaze has to take the guy from Powers Johnson, and they have to be able to swap that. And the Powers Johnson has to get to the center, and the center gets to the guard, and the guard gets to the tackle. And they got to properly pick it all up. If you want to be considered an elite offensive line, you got to process defensive line games and stunts and simulated pressures. You got to be able to do all this stuff if you want to be an elite offensive line. So it's going to be a great test for the Raiders as we kind of get into it this upcoming game. I'm excited as hell, man. I think we're going to learn a lot more about the Raiders in this game. Given the fact you'll now have kind of like 2 games, and it should be clean weather as well for the Raiders. Let's wrap it up, man. Final thing I want to kind of talk about. The Raiders did work out 2 defensive backs and a wide receiver today. Ryan McFadden puts it out there. He's saying that the Raiders worked out defensive back Isaiah Bolden, defensive back Alex Johnson, and wide receiver Samori Tor, per the league's transaction wire. So that's interesting if you guys think about it. Not that I think the Raiders, not that we're working out like Jabril Peppers, who I think technically already signed at this point. We're not working out Nnamdi Asomugha. But it's interesting that we're working out defensive backs, more defensive backs, given that the Raiders have already brought in so many corners. They brought in so many safeties. Literally over the last 2 months, we probably signed like 5-6 of those guys, right? Or, we brought in like 5-6 of those guys, and we've signed more defensive backs, safeties and corners than any other position. And the Raiders apparently still haven't figured it out, which is kind of surprising to me. I didn't think the Raiders were awful against the Patriots. But I will say this, Drake May is, he's an inexperienced quarterback. So if there were passing lanes, which there definitely were watching the tape, he didn't necessarily see it. And then, of course, it was kind of wet and the weather wasn't great. So he also missed some things. In a clean game against a quarterback like Justin Herbert, he might not miss those type of things. So maybe the Raiders feel like, hey, we need to go out there and we need to get a defensive back that can make us better. But at this point, Isaiah Bolden's not going to make you that much better. Alex Johnson's not going to start and make you that much better. If the Raiders are struggling with some of the guys they have starting, go out there and trade for someone. But, I don't know. I don't know what this means here for the Raiders. Maybe this is a special teams type of thing. I just don't know. It's just kind of confusing. But again, just taking a step back, I actually like some of what I saw from some of these guys. Jeremy Chin, he did have a couple plays where he had like some losing reps. Isaiah Paul-Mao had the interception, but he also had some couple losing reps in coverage. Eric Stokes, I think he was like targeted 6 times in those 6 catches on his side as well. Kyu Blue Kelly was the only guy that I think really looked good to me. But even more so than that, I feel like the Raiders defense is going to be like a bend don't break type of defense. Also, we're going to give up plays, but we're not going to give up chunk plays. We're not going to give up big plays. We'll give up plays in between the numbers, in between the, like 10, 15 yards at max. And the idea is that when that time comes, you can, get a stop. If the Chargers have 6 great drives where they average 80 yards a drive, but all 8 of those drives end up, settling for field goals, you're not scoring 60 points after having 400 yards, right? You're only going to score 24 points. Point in saying that is if you want to be the type of defense that can bend but don't break, be that type of defense that can get stops when it matters, which I think that is what the Raiders are trying to do at this point, you're going to give up yards. But as we saw against the Patriots, the defense basically won us this game, right? The defense still shut it down for most of the game. They stepped up, they got it done when it mattered most. And I know the offense kind of did their thing as well. They had a lot of yards. I think the defense did a phenomenal job against the Patriots. So we'll see what ends up happening against the Chargers. Let me know what you guys think about the Raiders working some of these guys out. What do you guys think about the pass pro and some of what Chris Sims has to say about Ashton Jeanty? Let me know what you guys think about Thomas Booker, man. Thumbs up, subscribe. I hope you guys all have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.